Hey everyone, Lockie Cook here, the founder of Iyarn. I wanted to give a quick intro to the story behind Iyarn. People are like, oh, that has a bit of an indigenous swang to it because let's have a yarn. So I'll give you a bit of the 101 about where it came from. So here's a picture of me in 2005 on the bottom left. I went up to a community called Aarnja or One Arm Point. This is actually a little place called Gabadang campsite, which is Frank Davies' block, and the camp was there with a bunch of young, 70 young Indigenous boys from all over the Kimberley, run by an organisation called Garnduwa. And up there, as a privileged white kid from the city in Perth, and I went up there for the first time and really connected with a huge other side of Australia and the Bardi people, predominantly in Yawuru people, and my eyes were really opened up to a whole different way of being an Australian. And coming through the drive from Aarnja through Beagle Bay, Juddiston, Bedina, on the way back to Broome to fly back to Perth, I saw a big gap between me and my experience growing up as a kid and the guys who just spent the last 10 days with out on country my age, and just their difference between experiences at their school. They didn't have a library, didn't have the sport equipment, nothing. And then, so essentially what we did in the later years of school, instead of raising money for some massive, generic charity as part of our community service, we set up a bit of a book drive, and I set up the ICEA Foundation. And the ICEA Foundation did a bunch of different things over the years. I was leading it for about 8 years. Cultural awareness training was a big one of them, enhancing school facilities and resources in remote communities. It was an amazing experience. And through that time, I developed some real, genuine, deep relationships with the community. And after a few years, this old girl, Bessy Ejai, who's the matriarch of the Ejai family, she actually pulled me aside one time and said, Lockie, we see you in the community, that a lot of the young kids like you, and us community members, we see that you're going to come and see us so often. It's important we actually give you a name and invite you into our Ejai family. And I'm going to pass Norman's name on to you. His name is Binjali. And so, yeah, it was pretty special. Bessie pulled me aside and gave me that name. And a big part of it was coming part of and practicing a bit of Bardi culture and respecting certain protocols. And there's so many different parts of Bardi culture, and I've only got a little taste of it. But from one word that it really stood out for me, there's this concept called Iyarn. So Iyarn is a word for your body, your emotion, your mind, your spirit, your everything. And so, the idea is that if anyone was to ask you, oh, how's your Iyarn? Or in community, we'd say, Gruna Iyarn. And my mum would say, Donna Edgar, she would say, or Ejai now, she'd say, oh, Binjali Gruna Iyarn. So how is my Iyarn? And, do I have a heavy Iyarn or light Iyarn? I'm feeling really good. And, it's been, over time, it's really kind of disrespectful if you're not really respecting that person and sharing how you're actually going. And one time to Donna, my mum, she asked me, and I kind of brushed her off, and I said, oh, I'm good, thanks, catch ya, I'm going spearfishing. And she pulled me aside and growled at me, that's disrespectful. And in that moment, I was like, whoa, it's such a thing, this word Iyarn. If someone asks you, you got to reciprocate that. And in our Western world, we're so, oh, how you going? Yeah, good, catch ya. And it's like, are you okay? Yeah, fine. Are we truly creating these safe spaces to check in? Or how do we find a word that can mean more than saying, how you going? So this is where the idea of Iyarn came from. And I've been very lucky to work with the Kimberley Land Council, with many different Indigenous-led and organisations in the Kimberley, and spoke to many of my countrymen up that way, and they've given me permission. They're really supporting me to use this word Iyarn to facilitate a yarn in our community to go deeper, more meaningful with what matters. And so that's where the word came from. But the idea was, when I was early 20s, mid-20s, when I was back end of ICEA, personally I had a few mental health challenges that transitioned from being an athlete into, being working full-time. It was quite difficult. And also my family had a few mental health challenges as well. And so what I used to do with one of my best mates, it's a bit of a Tony Robbins thing, that 8 areas of life, or, every once a month we'd sit down and, draw in a circle and choose the areas of life that matter. Finances here, personal growth and health you can see, but you can customize these to whatever you want. 0 in the middle, 10 on the outside, and then you end up dotting the points together. And what you get, I like to say, you end up getting a bit of a conversation canvas. And this conversation canvas can be used to facilitate a real deep meaningful conversation between you and your mate. And then what happened over time, I actually used this framework to check in on volunteers in the organisation, and then in previous businesses I've been involved with other employees, but then even for consulting for a bit of community sentiment. It's a really quick and easy and effective way to get authentic data, and but then also have a visualization around what that is, because that can stimulate a meaningful conversation, or we like to say an Iyarn yarn. And then you got here, this is a quick little check-in that we've got here, and we create QR codes and things like that, which is really quite powerful. But yeah, it's a really effective way to facilitating conversations in the communities through Iyarn. This is a bit of a public check-in that you can do that I did at an event, and this is the wellbeing check-in that you're more than welcome to do. And yeah, that's just the 101 on Iyarn.